Okay, so I must have been hungry this morning because I caught sight of some sort of images of animals on a computer screen, and instantly my mind flashed up. You know those animal-shaped biscuits, the sort of chocolate-shaped elephants and giraffes and stuff like that. And that got me thinking because I've been kind of musing about doing a sort of another kind of social philosophy chat or cultural philosophy, if there is such a thing. And it just occurred to me. I thought, animal-shaped biscuits, how kind of ridiculous that is. And is there some sense in which that we're kind of preparing children for eating animals? And it certainly looks that way, doesn't it? If you wanted to train children to sort of eat animals, you'd give them animal-shaped biscuits, right? And it reminds me of those kind of like pig-shaped luncheon meat, and like sort of almost sort of comedy cartoon pigs, kind of printed on these slices of ham and so on and so forth. I don't think I've seen chicken-shaped chicken. I think I've seen pig-shaped chicken though, right? So, I mean, I mean, this presumably this kind of makes it easier to feed kids. It's like, oh, look how fun this is. This is fun food, right? And obviously, teaching them about animals is a big part of getting them used to classification and speciesation and sort of boundary lines between types and so on. So this is good kind of for sort of logic development and so on. But it just what hope is there for some sort of vegetarian agenda if there is one, if we're feeding our kids animal-shaped foods, right? And now that I'm not going to go on any particular sort of moral crusade about any of this, but it's just an observation that and I was thinking of entitling this talk. I was going to say everything has changed and nothing's changed, right? So let's get back to the luncheon meat thing. So, what this emphasises is that we very much inherit a kind of social paradigm, a view of the world that is the current prevailing sort of traditional mainstream view of the world, which I think is slowly fragmenting due to various sort of perhaps postmodernism and other sort of types of thinking are beginning to erode these sorts of mainstream consensus. Perhaps, I don't know, but this is the question. Has anything really changed? So let's just think this through. So we receive all of these various kind of cultural characteristics, right? And we just accept them as given. So, for example, when I was growing up, I remember seeing things like red telephone boxes and red pillar boxes and stuff, and there was this kind of strange sense of timelessness about these very traditional kind of objects. It was as though they'd always been there. It was as though the sort of Bobby on the beat around our hometown had always been there. There'd always been a Bobby on the beat. That's kind of how it seemed to me, because you feel like you're sort of coming into this world that was already there, and you don't really understand as a child. I mean, perhaps I didn't really. I don't think. I think it was a bit daft in many ways, really. But I didn't really get that the world was an ever-changing, dynamic place. It was like my grandparents had always been there. They were like the archetypes of grandparents, and I mean, I literally said, even into my 30s, I would talk to Nana and say, look, you're never going to die. Don't worry about that. You're not going to die. I mean, and I think she'd even find that sort of vaguely sort of reassuring. It's like we could both live in this fluffy sort of containment, or safety containment unit of total ignorance, and we'd both do that, so even into her 80s, I'd say, no, don't worry, you're not going to die. So, it's all utter denial, because there's still a part of me, or there was still a part of me that couldn't face the idea of the world changing and an era coming to an end. I mean, this reminds me of a couple of really sort of surprising things. How emotions just sort of creep up on you and you don't know what's about to happen to you sometimes emotionally. It's like, the tides almost. It's just coming, whether you whether you like it or not, right? And there's been a couple of occasions in the last few years where I've just randomly discovered that a couple of certain school friends have died suddenly, and on both occasions I've just burst into tears both times. And and neither of these characters were particularly close to me. In fact, one of them I remember actually having fights with, and we didn't really get on. We did later on, actually. But I instantly burst into tears because even though he was a bastard, he was our bastard. He was he was part of our crew. You know, he went through the same crappy school and the same crappy town that we went through, right? And so there's this kind of bonding that just, you know, this tribal bonding that occurs among humans, whether we like it or not. And it's like part of my tribe had just been, you know, taken away. You know, I can't moan about them anymore, you know. Um, so, yeah, you know, so why am I talking about that? It's this idea again that sort of nothing changes really. That those bonds, those emotions and things are just there. You know, they form part of a chapter in a sort of animal encyclopedia about humans. You know, the habits and traits and um, predilections and so on of the human animal, right? So you know, so it looks like things have changed, right? People are wandering around with mobile phones. People are getting on high-speed trains, planes, flying into space, and so on. It looks like we're radically and utterly different from sort of almost any previous incarnation throughout history, or this thing we call history. We just don't look anything like any of our forebears. Whereas for a long, very long periods in human history, certain technologies were there for potentially hundreds of years. In fact, there are still places with horse and carts now, you know, that still use horse and carts. And how long's horse and cart been around for? You know, thousands of years probably. And so that, you know, so it does seem that in the last sort of few hundred, you know, couple hundred years, post-industrial mass production and so on, that we've kind of you know, we've gone into a kind of hyperbolic rate of technological growth and development, right? But I'm going to venture that in some sense, in spite of that, nothing has really changed, right? And again, I'm going to try and root this in just personal experience. I mean, I have two girls, sort of teenage girls, and you know, tragically for me, one of their favourite hobby is shopping and going into town and buying crap and spending, you know, hard-earned money on sort of really crap stuff. You know, that probably won't even last. And you know, so you know, I have a kind of philosophical sort of bias against this behaviour because you know you know, even as I'm a consumer, but I don't like this sort of present day consumerist kind of model. And I think it is worse than it's been before. And so we'll get to that. So I have this kind of sort of anti-shopping disposition. I just can't bear it, right? And you know, it could be a man thing. You know, I suppose having been dragged around the shops by you know Nan and Grandad and just watched Grandad grumbling about the whole goddamn thing, and Nana talking to absolutely everyone in the shop. You know, I mean, she'd make friends with people in the queue. You know, and then we listened to their sort of stories of these strangers that we'd never met before. And she said, "Oh, and, you know, Alf's cousin Rob, he's got gout and it's terrible. I mean, he's been off work for 3." I mean, it's like we don't know any of these people or their dogs, and you'd even hear about those. Um, so perhaps I've been given this you know disposition towards shopping because of some of this stuff. But anyway, obviously being a dutiful father, I just take them into town anyway, and spend money on them that probably can't really afford, and you know, watch them spending money that I've given them that they probably can't really afford, and not saving anything. But you know what? You know what I've tried to do with this stuff is just you know, set aside all of that crap and just go with the flow and just watch them feeling happy, and not judging the situation. And you know, this is the way to go, isn't it? This is what they want to do. This is the situation we're in. However we've got here, I've only got myself to blame. You know, if I wanted them to be less consumerist, I should have put in more effort as a father to try to educate them and so on and so forth. But this is, you know, whatever's gone on in the past, this is where we are. So I just stick all that to one side and go into town. I don't even do this. I don't explain any of this to them, by the way, because that would frickin' ruin the day. So. But I end up enjoying it, right? So we go and eat crappy food, we buy crappy stuff. I watch them try things on, and occasionally they sort of give me the doe eyes. I end up buying them these things, and the hilarious kind of persuasive tactics they use to try and, you know, coerce me into buying things, and it works, right? And who else would I want to spend? You know, I mean, they're my world, these guys. But the point I'm getting to here is that what's really going on here, I don't think it's necessarily about buying crap stuff. I don't think it's about the bubble tea and the smoothies and the ridiculous coffees and stuff. I think it's just about being among people, right? So this is just the modern marketplace. This is wandering into the village fete. This is wandering into the village church. This is just a gathering of the community, and it's kind of there's something what's the word here? Self realizing about the whole thing, because these are our people, like it or not. These are our contemporaries, right? And whether they're shoving junk food and buying plastic goods and sticking their kids in front of the TV, and we stick all of these kind of you know um, judgy kind of remarks on any of this stuff, and everyone will have a point of view on everyone else, right? So there'll be people pointing the finger saying, oh, look at those kind of snobs, that obsess about their appearance, or look at those smelly people that don't take enough care of themselves, look at those misbehaving children, look at those posh children, look at there will be some sort of finger pointing from every possible quarter, right, to such an extent that it almost just becomes this kind of irrelevant noise, right? And so again, you need to just sort of put that to one side and look at what's happening, like biosocially, I think. And you can kind of just, if you just switch your mind up when you're in these places, you listen to the chatter and the hubbub, and just watch these groups move about, almost like I hate to say it, almost like a herd-like way about us. There's this old narrative, isn't there? Oh, man the hunter, the pride and the glory, the lionization of man's history. But actually, there's this other view that is man the hunted, and you can indeed see from our collective behaviour that people seem to pursue safety in numbers. They like to be in the middle of the groups, right? Because obviously, if you're a sheep on the edge of a flock, you're more likely to get picked off by the wolves, aren't you, right? Or the dogs, and so there's this kind of inherent mammalian herd-like direction of travel, I think, that makes us seek comfort. But then there's so many examples of people seeking danger and excitement and so on and so forth. So it's not just a single story with us, and this is the problem in some sense of being human. This idea of the blank slate and free will and the ability to kind of transcend the laws of physics and even to the sort of perhaps laws of biology and do things that actually go against immediate tactical biological considerations. You think there's this thing called the light cone, isn't there? And the light cone of humans, in some sense, extends beyond their own lives because people lay plans that won't come to fruition for possibly hundreds of years. Planting an oak tree. That's not going to be a mature adult oak tree with a huge ecosystem in and around it for hundreds of years potentially, but someone's gone to the effort to plant, and building up maybe businesses or family kind of hierarchies and so on and so forth, and power structures and stuff. These things take time and effort and risk and so on. So, yeah, we build towards the future as well as towards advantage within our own immediate sort of light cone. So where are we going with this? So yeah. So I think that so my teenage girls, they just want to be around people. They probably want to see boys. They probably want to be seen by boys or girls. Whichever way they go. And I think they just want to smell others and be and eat and be seen eating. They want to show off their new clothes and things like that. They're quite into this. They look very similar. It's funny. Then it's like they're in a kind of a girl band or something like Mel and Kim or something. Sort of these black bomber jackets, the sort of Nike stuff, and a bit gangster but kind of classy gangster, or somewhere between sort of Posh Spice and Eminem or something. I don't know. But they look cool to me, and here's me. I want to look. I still want to look cool. Sort of long hair, and trying to. I think having daughters has actually kind of fueled some of that. Perhaps they sort of reawakened a little bit of vanity in myself, and so a bloody ear. I re-pierced my earring hole in my left ear, for God's sake. Trying to be a hip dad and all this kind of stuff. But the point is, I think nothing much has really changed in this situation, right? So I think you could look at a medieval marketplace. You've got people bartering goods. You've got people eating and falling in love and fighting and arguing and pointing the finger, as we say. So what's really changed? Well, we could say we've got more efficient at doing what we do, and we've got these. We don't have to carry metal around anymore. We just got a little bit of plastic, but fundamentally, it's the model is unchanged. There's this kind of nothing new under the sun thing. You might say, well, artificial intelligence. That's going to be such a radical change that you can't pin that to any previous model or sort of facticity. But you could say, well, really? Because actually, AI, if it's going to be just doing slightly better maths and it's going to be doing slightly better kind of analysis and computation and so on and so forth than humans, or even drastically better, it's still the same forms of computation. So you could just compare it with the academic elite or the intelligentsia, or the intellectual kind of groups. You could say, well, they were the old, they're the old ChatGPT. People you could go to and say, I've got a problem, what do we do? And they give you the answer. So functionally, I still don't really think we've got anything particularly new here. We've just got people doing the same kind of reasoning, enhanced by the processing capacity of these neural networks, right? Which are, again, functionally speaking, just kind of an extension of the human brain, because of course the human brain does its computations using neural networks, right? There are some critical fundamental differences between the way that the two operate. The sort of wet goods of the brain. It's not an exact simulation of what's going on in ChatGPT, but it's not far off, right? So you've got these kind of reinforced thresholds that can kind of adapt and change. So kind of like an azimuth, an Archimedes screw. So, or a thermostat. It's just an adjustment of weights in the pursuit of a particular goal or a threshold. So you set a thermostat to, the target temperature is 70, dips below 65, you turn the heat up a little bit to respond to that dip, get it back to 70. It's homeostasis. This is kind of a bit like what life does, maintaining certain physical parameters. And so, my assertion here is that, we've got VR, we've got AI, we've got ridiculously efficient spending and buying and all this kind of stuff capabilities, but it's still a good old-fashioned marketplace for people bartering. We just happen to be bartering this kind of so-called measure of effort, this thing called money, which again depends on the sort of mass belief in its value. Really, it has no objective sort of value really beyond the present sort of belief structure around it. But having said that, it would be very difficult to kind of turn your back on it and say, well, okay, I deny the existence of money and I'm going to behave accordingly. I have seen it done, and actually there's just someone who's in fact very close to me who's pursued that exact goal, and with great courage and great difficulty, it has to be said. And looking to find ways of potentially generating income in sort of like non-employment kind of ways, which is complicated. That's a whole rabbit hole right there. Nothing's really changed, and 'twas ever thus. So I'm going to kind of listen back on this and reflect on it, because I think there's some avenues for further inquiry here, and I hope you don't mind this kind of this sort of meandering approach to this. I think sometimes it's best to just let the ideas flow freely rather than come in with a structured, premeditated set of thoughts. But okay, let's see how this goes, and I might offer up some more. Thank you. Bye.